Pray.
As president of Berger Consulting and emeritus professor at Auburn University, Dr. Bruce Berger has taught motivational interviewing in healthcare and methods for improving treatment adherence for over 30 years. His research interests include health behavior change and improving treatment adherence, which have been reviewed in his 3 books and over 900 papers and seminars. Bruce has been a consultant and trainer for many organizations, including the U.S. Air Force, the VA, the U.S. Army, Pfizer Inc., Procter & Gamble, Novartis, AstraZeneca, GSK, and over 50 health plans, including Humana, Harvard Pilgrim, Tufts Health, and Blue Cross Blue Shield. He is also the recipient of the Johnson & Johnson Award, the Lyman Award, and the first American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy's Award of Excellence for his research. Please welcome Dr. Bruce Berger.
Thank you. Good morning. First, I have to thank Cmsa for inviting me to come and speak. I'm probably going to need this water, the dry air. I don't know if the dry air gets to your throats and stuff. It does mine. In particular, I'd like to thank Becky Perez, Michelle Lee, and Brianna Garza for not only inviting me, but making it so easy for me to get here and do what I'm going to do today. One of the things that you may or may not know is I'm Ohio born and bred, but, and I'm a graduate 3 times of the Ohio State University. They make us say that. In any case, what I also realize is I've now lived in Auburn, Alabama, starting this year for over 41 years. War Eagle. So I've lived in the Deep South for 41 years. And recently, I asked a native Alabamian, is there any amount of time that I can live in the South and be considered Southern? And see, some of you are already doing this to me, okay? And anyway, so I asked this native Alabamian, and Bubba looked at me, and don't laugh, she was a really good-looking woman. And she said, Bruce, if you put lizards in the oven, will they ever become biscuits? So that kind of tells, oh, by the way, she also added this one, that Yankees are like hemorrhoids. If you go down and go back up, it's fine, but if you go down and stay down, it's a problem, okay? Nonetheless, I've been there for 41 years. So what do I know, right? All right, I have a lot to talk to you in the 58 minutes now that I have left about what I think is a really important topic. So let me show you, as I'm putting my learning objectives on the screen, let me just put them, whoops, let me go back one. This is a topic that involves a problem that we all have almost every day. And not only is it a problem that we all have almost every day, it's a problem that has unbelievable implications in terms of how we treat each other, how we treat our patients, how organizations operate, and the like. And so we're going to be talking about something called self-deception and objectification today. Now, before I do, I want to start with a story. And hopefully by the end of my presentation, you'll understand how the story fits. But here's the story. There was a monastery in a beautiful wooded area. People went there to picnic. But the monastery was down to its final 4 elderly monks. And the monastery used to be a place that was really vibrant with worship and very spiritual. And now it was down to its last 4 monks, elderly monks. And the abbot, the oldest monk, was very distressed. The abbot had this keen sense of always knowing when this rabbi, who had a cottage in the woods that he used for meditation, the abbot always could sense when the rabbi was in his cottage. And on this day, he sensed he was. And so he went to the rabbi's cottage, he knocked on the door, and the rabbi welcomed him in and said, you know, what's going on? And the abbot said, I'm just distressed. The monastery, the spirit seems to have gone. People are not joining the order anymore. They still come to picnic outside, but they're not joining the order anymore. And the rabbi looked at him and he said, I don't know what I can do to help you, but all I can do is tell you that one of those among you is the Messiah. And the abbot looked at him and he said, what did you say? And the rabbi said, I don't know how to tell you how to help you, but all I can tell you is that one of those among you is the Messiah. And the abbot looked at him and said, are you sure? And he said, I'm positive. Well, the abbot ran back to the monastery as fast as his legs would take him. And he told the other monks about what the rabbi had told him. And they sat down at this big table and they started making a list of all of their positive attributes so they could figure out which one of them it was. And then they figured out that the abbot was the oldest and the wisest, so maybe it was him. But on the other hand, Father John, he was kind of cantankerous, but he was always right. And not arrogantly right, he just was right. On the other hand, Brother Michael, he was somebody that had unbelievable empathy for people. And so they went on for the entire day, and by the end of the day, they couldn't figure out who it was. But something really remarkable happened. When people started visiting the monastery and picnicking, they sensed this reverence for which these monks were treating each other now, even though they never figured it out. And people would now go into the monastery and interact with the monks. And they were so taken by how well they were treated that some of the young men started joining the monastery. And within 6 months, it was flourishing. Hold that thought. So, how many of you have heard of this guy, Freud? Okay? He did a lot of things wrong, but he really asked an important question. He asked the question, when are people not people? And if you think about it, people are always people, even if we're behaving badly. So, to see a person as an object requires us to become blind. Meaning, if I see you as an object, and how many of you realize that racism, sexism, misogyny are all forms of objectification? How many of you know what I'm talking about? So here's the thing. If you are always a person, and I am always a person, even if I am behaving badly, for me to see you as anything other as a person means I become blind. How many of you are with me so far? Question is why? What causes the blindness? And what are the implications for that? And so often, part of the problem is we don't see the truth about ourselves or others. Let me give you some interesting examples. I want everybody in this room, and don't tell the person next to you what you come up with. I just want you to count the number of F's in the sentence that you see up here. And there are no tricks. E's are not F's with an additional line. Just count the number of F's, and don't tell the person next to you. And when you're done, if you'll put your heads down on your tables. Okay, how many of you feel pretty certain you know how many F's are in that sentence? All right, I want you to look around the room when I do this. How many of you see a sentence that has only 3 F's in it? Raise your hand good and high. Only. Raise your hands really high so people can see them. Bunch of people raise their hands. How many of you see 7 F's? Keep your 7 F's, raise your hand. How many of you who have 3 F's are looking at them like, what's going on here? How many of you see a sentence that has 4 or 5 or 6 F's in it? Raise your hand. Are any of you wondering how this is possible? Do you all agree you're looking at the same thing? All right. Now, I don't have a laser pointer, but count along with me. F is in finished, F is in files, count along, 2, are the result of 3, years of 4, scientific 5, experience of expert 6, of years of expert 7. How many of you now see it? Okay. We human beings have what are called psychological scotoma. It is perceptual blindness, right? It prevents us from seeing things sometime. By the way, if you do this with 100 people who have never seen this before, 30% will say, or 70% will say 3Fs, which means they're normal. But they're wrong, okay? If 30 or 20% will say 7Fs, they're not normal, but they're right. And for those of you who said 4, 5, or 6, you're not normal or right. Okay? But here's what I want you to understand. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It simply means you read the sentence differently. And Alan Kahneman has a book, Daniel Kahneman has a book called Thinking Slow and Fast, that oftentimes our fast brain skips over things. For those of you that read phonetically, you saw the of as a V, okay? But nonetheless, your brain, unless you got 7, caused you to make a mistake. Can we make mistakes in thinking we know other people? Let me show you another example. What do you see? How many of you see 2 triangles? 2 big triangles. How many of you realize there are no triangles on that page, on that slide? Look carefully. If you took away everything that's black on that page, that white triangle won't be there anymore. Do you realize that? How many of you see the Pac-Man? Now you do, right? How many of you realize that the black triangle is not completed? It's not a triangle, is it? How many of you saw it as a triangle? How many of you really did see a white and a black triangle when you saw this? Okay, here's what's happening, and this is really important to what I'm going to talk about today. Our brain, there's a scientist named Anil Seth. He's a neuroscientist. And you ought to look him up. His last name is S-E-T-H. His first name is Anil, A-N-I-L. He has a TED Talk. What he says is we live controlled hallucinations. For those of you that saw the triangles, you're living a controlled hallucination. We live these controlled hallucinations every day. Our brain takes in information, and then our brain makes its best guess about what it's seeing. Stored in our brain is also triangles. Our brain sees mostly triangle and says, okay, my best guess is it a triangle? How many of you following what I'm saying? So our brain is filling in information that's not even there. So on the first example, you didn't see things that were there, and in this one, you're seeing things that aren't there. And here's a more important question. You know that a dog could come in this room. When you came in this room, every one of us had a general sense or smell of what the room smelled like. A dog could come in this room and smell every single individual as it comes into the room because of its sense of smell. What's reality? Do you understand the question? An eagle could see things on the ground and in the sky we can't see. Do you know that we only take in and process 5% of what's out there in our brain? And then our brain makes its best guess of what's happening based on that 5%. Any of you going, wow? I am. I think that's just amazing. Can we get things wrong because of that? Absolutely. So, Martin Buber was a great philosopher. He wrote a book called I and Thou, which means I and you. And he said, basically, and I'm going to give you examples, if there is no I, that you and I are not separate beings. We are in relationship to someone else. You know, in my introduction, you heard that I won awards. And the way I think of it is, I was given an award. I didn't win them. And what I mean by that is, I have been fortunate enough to stand on the back of giants and some small, really wise people. Meaning anything I've accomplished, anything I have learned, all that we have all learned, our language, what we know, how we behave, has been in relationship to an impossible without other people. We wouldn't even know how to eat or drink without the help of other people. How many of you are with me so far? We are relational, hardwired, okay? There is something deeper than behavior that others can sense, something that undercuts even what appears to be correct behavior, and we sense it. How many of you have ever met somebody who shook your hand, a stranger, at a meeting, shook your hand, smiled, and said, "So good to see you," and you knew they could care less? And you could sense it. And you could sense it. My wife, who is sitting back there in the pink outfit, knows that I have this meter. I know I can sense people's goodness and people's malintentions almost immediately because I've been doing a lot of this for a long time. But let me give you some examples to help you understand how this works. All right, I want you to imagine a scenario. You're driving in your car, there's shopping on either side of this 4-lane road. 2 lanes on your side, a median strip, shopping on this side, shopping on this side, and you're looking down the street and you see somebody who's creeping toward coming out into your lane, and you know if they do, you're gonna have to slam on your brakes. And you're thinking to yourself, surely they're not gonna do that. How many of you had this experience? Okay? And then they do. And then they do. And you do have to slam on your brakes. What are some of the things that we do in addition to slamming on our brakes? Huh? Oh, we wave at them. Yeah. Sure we do. Hi. I like to think that some people, maybe not anybody in this room, give them the universal signal of friendship, right? And I'm doing this for read between the lines, right? What else do we do? What else? Language. We may swear at them. We may yell at them. Somebody says, beep the horn. Would I be more accurate in saying lay on the horn? Okay, what else? Do we ever pull up next to them and let them see how upset we are? Okay, now, let me ask you this. I agree with you completely. What are the reasons that we would say we did that? So let's say, for example, that you and I were good friends or married, and you come home and you're saying, Bruce, you can't believe what this really nice person I waved at did today, right? You cannot believe what this jerk did. He cut me off. And why are we upset? They put us at risk. Do you agree? Yes. And then I would probably say what to you? What did you do? And you would say, I gave him the universal symbol of friendship. I pulled up next to him, I laid on my horn, and I let him know that I wasn't happy. And I would say, good for you. How many of you agree this happens? All right, I want you to rewind the story. Same thing happens, and now you pull up to this person that you have flipped off, laid on the horn with, and swore at, and you see in the other car, it's your minister, priest, rabbi, best friend. How many of you are now hiding under the dash? And here's my question, and this is a serious question. What are you feeling now? Embarrassed. Why? Because you know them, but you wouldn't be embarrassed if you know them if you didn't do anything, right? So what are you embarrassed about? Your own behavior, which we felt justified in before because they cut us off. And then when you came to me, I helped you feel justified and self-righteous by telling you, good for you. Do you see how this starts rolling and escalating? Okay? So, hold that thought about why did it change when you knew them? Next example. A mother and her husband are sleeping in bed. They've just had a new child. This always amuses me. I love when men say, we're breastfeeding. You know. My wife and I breastfed, and my nipples were never sore. Okay? Nonetheless, I love that men say we're breastfeeding. Okay, so they're laying in bed, and the husband hears the child cry. And he looks at his wife and he thinks, gosh, she's been getting up every night, multiple times to feed the child. And they've been saving breast milk also. And he thinks to himself, you know what, she's tired. I should get up. I should get up and tend to the baby. If the baby needs to be changed, I can change it. If the baby needs to be fed, there's breast milk I can get, right? Then he thinks to himself, if I get up, I'm not going to be able to fall back to sleep. And then he thinks to himself, I've got to work tomorrow. And all she has to do is stay home with the baby. I knew this wouldn't go well in a group of mostly women. And then he thinks to himself, what kind of mother doesn't hear her baby cry? Now, somebody said an exhausted mother. Now, here's what I want you to understand. How did he see her when he woke up? When he woke up and he heard the baby cry and he looked at her, how did he see her? As somebody who was tired, who had been getting up night after night and tending to the baby. He saw her as someone who had wants, needs, and importance in her life every bit as much as him. In the first example of the car, somebody did something, right? What has she done? Nothing. And now how is he seeing her? As an object. Do you hear it? What kind of mother doesn't hear her baby cry? Something I forgot to tell you. I often drive to Atlanta's airport. I had to drive to Atlanta's airport to come here. Some months ago, I take Interstate 85, and I was in the right lane, and I started drifting into the left lane, and this guy honked at me. And I immediately pulled back over. I didn't realize I had drifted. And as he pulled up next to me, I went like this. Sorry. And some of you may be wondering why I don't have either hand on the wheel at this point, but nonetheless, he looked at me and he said, he did like this. He literally went, it's okay. I put him at risk. How could he do that? He saw me as a person, didn't he? Who makes mistakes? He had grace, didn't he? Okay? So hold these thoughts. These are two different examples, and in the second one, she did nothing. She was sleeping, right? All right. Here's another example for you to think about. In my class, I taught a communication class in the School of Pharmacy at Auburn University. I used to require a paper that was a minimum of 7 pages long, and of course all the students' papers were a minimum of 7 pages long. They're smart, you know. It also said that spelling and grammar counted because they had spell check and grammar check, and 1 point would be taken off for each unique grammar and spelling error. This student came into my office, Didn't ask to come in, walked in, took his paper, threw it on my desk, it bounced off my chest, and he said, I didn't know this was an effing English class, except he said the phonetically correct word. Okay? Somebody just said, oh my God. All right? Are you wondering what did I do? I looked at him, and in a calm voice, I said, you're obviously very angry. He got 38 points taken off, okay, for spelling and grammar. Unique errors. I said, you're obviously very angry about the grade that you got on your paper, and I want to talk to you about that. I really do. But I don't want to be sworn at, and I don't want to be yelled at. If you can talk to me, you can sit and we'll do it now. What would you like to do? He turned red and sat down. Why do you think he turned red and sat down? I not only acknowledged his feelings, how did I treat him? Like a person. Do you know what I saw in what he gave me? A very stressed out human being. Okay, now, you know what would have been tempting? What would have been tempting would have been to look at him and say, I don't know who the hell you think you're talking to, but get your butt out of my office. And by the way, we have an honor board and an honor code in our school, and I know because I created the code and the board. Okay? And I could have just as well said, okay, you have just violated the honor code, and I'm going to write this up and send it to the honor board. If I did that, would I have been seeing him as a person? Yes. Yes. See, seeing somebody as a person doesn't mean that you don't set boundaries. If I would have looked at him, now listen to, remember I said there's something deeper than behavior. Could I have sent him to the honor board and seen him as a person? Yes. You know, your behavior has violated our honor code. Our code requires that I report this to the board for them to decide what to do. Could I have sent him to the honor board and seen him as an object? I don't know who the hell you think you are. This is going to the honor board. Do you hear the difference in how I see him? Now, here's what's interesting. If I had thrown him out of my office in anger, I would have probably then gone to another faculty member and told another faculty member, this student just came into my office, threw a paper that bounced off against my chest and told me he didn't know this was an effing English class. He would have said, what did you do? And I would have said, I threw his little butt out of my office. And he would have said, good for you. Distrust everyone in whom the power to punish or impulse to punish is powerful. Nietzsche said that. Meaning, if I go to somebody else in order to, I'm now building an army. I will go to other faculty members and tell them what this kid did, and they will help me feel justified and self-righteous. Are you following this? This happens in organizations all the time. Do you know when I go to people to complain about somebody else? When I know I've done something wrong. When I know deep down inside I've done something wrong. And guess what? What would he have done if I would have thrown him out of my office in anger? What would he have done? He would have gone back to the students and said, Berger is a hypocrite. He teaches communication, and he swore at me and threw me out of his office. Do we edit our stories? Yes. And now he would have formed an army of students that was against me and the faculty, and we got an army of faculty that are against the students, and in no way does this contribute to the mission of the school. But I didn't do that. How many of you get that me looking at him and saying, you're obviously very angry about the grade you got, and I want to talk to you about it, but I don't want to be sworn at, and I don't want to be yelled at. If you can talk to me, you can sit and we'll talk now. How many of you realize that is so much more powerful then get your butt out of my office. Do you know why? Anger is born in powerlessness. When we feel powerless, we often feel angry. Have any of you been stuck in traffic and have felt angry? Have any of you figured out the traffic doesn't care? I want to tell you about something that I did, and my wife knows I'm not great in traffic. And I'll be sitting there. We were down in Naples, Florida for a month, and in January, and it is so crowded. And it takes forever to go anywhere. And I'm sitting there thinking about all the idiots in front of me. Why won't they move their car? And what I didn't realize is that I was the idiot in front of somebody else. And before I went out the next time, I said to myself, you know what? These are people just like me, trying to get somewhere, trying to get home. They're not trying to aggravate me. They don't care that Bruce Berger is in his car. And as soon as I did that, the next time I went out, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Why? Because I saw them as people just like me. Now, here's a question. If there's somebody in front of me and the light turns green and they're not moving, can I honk my horn and see them as a person? Yes. Can I honk my horn and see him as an object? Yes. They'll be very different honks, won't they? Okay? So I want you to understand that any behavior that we have, we can do is seeing somebody as a person or as an object. Last story to help you understand this. My mother died about 4 years ago at the age of 97, or the ripe old age of 97. She spent the majority of her adult life trying to annoy other people. She was highly successful. Okay? Many of you may be thinking we were separated at birth. Okay? Yes. Okay. On my mother's 80th birthday, I have a brother who's 2.5 years older. He's 6'4". We have no idea where he came from. I am taller than both of my parents. Okay? We think there was a tall milkman back there somewhere, okay? In any case, my brother came up with the idea of let's get Mom a lily plant. Her name is Lillian. Get it? Isn't that sweet? And all of her friends called her Lily, all right? So he got this 4-foot tall lily plant. It was beautiful. It had the blooms and everything. What you need to understand about my mother is that she always complains about everything you gave her. Remember when cordless phones first came out and we thought, this is like a miracle from God? You know, and I gave her a cordless phone. Why? She had terrible arthritis in her hips and she could be in the bathtub and the phone would ring and she would make herself get out and answer it, and I was afraid she would fall. I got her a cordless phone that she could put by the tub, and she complained, you know I don't understand this technology stuff. So I showed her how to use it. A week later, she's, Bruce, it's your mom. I'm on the lanai. I'm not even in the house and I'm talking to you. And that's the pattern with her, always, okay? So we walk into the house, I'm ready, okay? My brother's standing there, all 6'4" of him, carrying the lily plant in. My mother looks at us, looks at the lily plant, and says, and I quote, "Where the hell am I supposed to put that in this small condo?" Okay, everybody get that? Where the hell am I supposed to put that in this small condo? My brother slammed it to the floor and told her the anatomically correct orifice to put it in. And we're off and running at the Berger house. Now, I have to tell you, I gotten to the point in my life at this point where I understood things so much better about me in relation to her and other people. And I almost laughed. And I didn't because I didn't want my brother to feel like I was laughing at his distress, okay? But nonetheless, listen to this. My brother slammed it down, said what he said, and bolted the door, went out the door in anger. Anger is born in powerlessness. He felt like that little kid all over again, disapproving, right, of mom. I looked at my mother, and this is what I learned to do. And I said, Mom, in a very calm voice, if you don't think it'll fit anywhere here, we'll be glad to take it back, and we'll give you the money for it. And she looked at me and said, why can't you get me something else? I said, Mom, we got you what you thought you might like. If you don't like it, it's okay. We'll give you the money. You can figure out what you want. How am I seeing her? Person or object? Person. And then she said, well, and I said, I'll tell you what. I'm going to leave it here overnight. If you find a place for it, great. If you don't, we'll take it back. And she said, well, I'll see. Now, many of you may need her at this point to say, okay, that's very nice of you. That's never going to be what she says. And it has nothing to do with me. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? All right. So now I got to go tend to my brother, who's pacing on the sidewalk, asking, why does she always have to be this way? What is wrong with her? And I looked at him and said, Dale, I know you're upset. The idea that you came up with was beautiful and loving. Nothing she can do changes that. But why does she have to be this way? And I said, I don't know. I kind of do, but it doesn't matter. What's the problem? The problem is he buys in. How did she treat him and me? Like an object. How did she treat her? How did he treat her? Like an object. This is called collusion, by the way. It's actually a word for it. Objectification begets objectification, oftentimes. If somebody comes up with an idea in a meeting and my first response is, that's ridiculous, what am I likely to get back? A defensive reaction. But if I say instead, I'm not sure I understand, could you explain more because I'm confused, will I get a different response? Yes, right? The next day we go over to my mother's house, and my mother looks at us and says, well, I found a place for it over there in the corner. My brother says, don't do us any damn favors. He doesn't get it, does he? He doesn't get it. Here's the really interesting moral of the story. Every time I'd go down in Florida to visit her, she'd take my hand and walk me over and show me a new bloom. But you've got to know that's just her. By the way, I'll tell you one other thing when I think about it. And this is what I mean about seeing people as people doesn't mean that you go soft and don't set boundaries. My mother is the type of person that when she called, I used to dread it because I knew it was going to be 2 minutes of how are you and 58 minutes of everything that's wrong with the world, including, why hasn't your son called me? Why has your brother not called me? And I would say, and so I learned to say to her a couple different things. One, if you want to know why my son Brian hasn't called you, you're going to need to talk to Brian. I'm not getting in the middle of this, right? Second, Mom, from now on, you get 15 minutes to complain at the beginning of the conversation, and then after that, we're going to talk about something else. Well, who are you to tell me I only have 15 minutes to complain? I said, I'm the person who knows how long I can listen to it. You know? By the way, she hung up the phone. That's okay. It has nothing to do with me. I told my brother what I did. My mother is 5'1" and my brother is 6'4", but she was the 500-pound gorilla in our life. And the thing is, when I told him what I did, he said, what did Mom do? I said, she hung up. And he said, are you okay with that? And I said, yeah, what's the big deal? The next time I talk to my mother, we're 10 minutes into the call and she says, "How many minutes do I have left?" Honest to God. Honest to God. And guess who I would have thought the problem was? Her. The real problem was I didn't know how to manage myself. Okay. We also see examples of this when we call patients difficult or non-compliant or the diabetic in 214. We're objectifying. Does everybody hear that? These are not diabetics. These are people who have diabetes. And it's not the person, it's not the diabetic in 214. It's Mrs. Jones who has diabetes, and here's why she's in the hospital. Because as soon as we objectify, we believe they deserve less care. And you know what I'm talking about. So, other examples of objectification: racism, sexism, misogyny, health disparities. So, there's two ways of being. Every time we encounter another person, and I'm going to tell you why we objectify, we have the choice of seeing the other person as a person, that I am in relationship to another person, that I see them as people, I'm responsive to their fears and concerns. I see that their life is as important to them as mine is to me. As soon as you're there, you're seeing them as a person. When I saw these other people just trying to get home, I was seeing them as people whose lives were just as important as mine. That guy that saw that I cut him off understood I was a person who just made a mistake. Okay? Or we can see people as objects, where people are vehicles for our bidding. How many of you have ever had people that try to use you? That's a form of objectification. And when I see people as objects, I am resistant to their reality. What do I mean by that? I mean that if I'm seeing somebody as an object, I'm resistant to the fact that they're not. They're not an object, whether I'm seeing them that way or not. Those were not triangles, whether you saw them or not. Everybody with me? Okay. If I see others at all, they're less important, less real, less relevant, and I'm deceived about their reality because they are people. All right. And there is no I. We are an I always in relationship, and people respond to how I'm being when I do something, not what I do itself. Can I see somebody as a person and refuse to allow them to drive my car? Yes. Okay. So, here is what happens that causes objectification. And I want to give you a little caveat after I explain this. Self-betrayal is what happens whenever I do something contrary to what I feel I should do for another, contrary to what I know to be right or the right thing to do, and then don't do it. Okay, I want you to really let that sink in. Self-betrayal is what happens when I know I should do something for someone, and then I don't, because I choose not to. Now, the caveat is this. We are suffering from a crisis in healthcare right now. Burnout among all the professions is at a high rate. We could spend a whole day talking about why. But fundamentally, we're talking about toxic systems. And toxic systems that treat healthcare people as objects. And then they treat their patients oftentimes as objects because they've been treated as objects. But I want to make an exception to what this is saying. You may be working in an environment where you want to help your patients, and you know the right thing to do would be to help your patients, but you are so short-staffed that you can't. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay? That is not self-betrayal. Self-betrayal is when you know you should do something for somebody and can. If I'm stuck at the bottom of a 12-foot hole and there's a little child at the top crying for help, My sense is to help, but I can't. That's not betrayal. Does everybody understand the distinction? But on the other hand, what should that husband have done, ladies? Get your butt. Now, I suspect that when you say get your butt out of bed, you might be objectifying. All right, and as soon as I betray myself, I begin the process of objectifying the other. I distort how I see them and myself. As soon as I objectified the person who cut me off, I become a victim, I become righteous, and they become idiots. As soon as he decided not to get up out of bed and tend to the baby, he became the victim. Remember? I got to get up. I got to do everything. And she became the object and less than. By the way, could he have gotten out of bed and tended to the baby and seen her as an object? Yes. If he got out of bed and thought to himself and then later expressed this, I got to do everything around here. Could he have stayed in bed and seen her as a person? Yes, under this condition. Let's say it is really true that he had a huge presentation the next day that was very important to him and his work. And he woke her up and he said, if you'll get up tonight, I know you're tired, but if I get up and start moving around, I'm not going to be able to fall asleep and I'm not going to be very good for my presentation. And if you'll do that, I'll get up the next few nights. Is that seeing her as a person? So again, everything can be done as seeing a person or as an object. The worst thing about objectification is I feel justified. If I would have thrown that student out of my office, I would have felt justified. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you the moral of that story. He slumped down in the chair and we talked. I became the biggest advocate of that student to the rest of the students. Because he saw me, at least in that moment, living what I had been talking about. Can I do it every single time? Oh, heck no. Can I do it more often than I used to? Absolutely. No. No. I mean, he really had 38 mistakes. And honestly, if I was going to give him the chance to redo it, I'd have to give everybody this chance. You know, he knew the rules in advance. They were all written down. So seeing somebody as a person doesn't mean you let people take advantage of you either. Okay. And I go in the box. The box is a metaphor that was created by the Berger Institute, and I have a couple of their books and the references. They're an organization that does organizational work on mindset and objectification. So they created a metaphor called the box. So when we go in the box is a metaphor for our blindness toward another person. Does that make sense? So there's a metaphoric box that's getting in the way of me seeing somebody. All right, so let me go through this quickly. So when we go in the box, when we objectify, we have self-justifying images. We start believing, I deserve respect. I didn't deserve to be cut off. You know, I've got to work hard. She needs to get up. When we go in the box, I deserve appreciation. I'm more important. I'm better than. I'm smarter than. We have distorted images of others. We horribilize. How many of you ever hear people in arguments? You never. And the other person says, I always. No, you never. Well, what about the one time I? And we're not arguing to solve the problem. We're arguing to be right. Did everybody hear that? Okay. We exaggerate. We're overly sensitive. We become victims. These are all indicators that you're in the box, that you're objectifying. These tell me I'm in the box. This is what's interesting. If this is how we feel when we're in the box, why would we ever go in? That's nuts. Do you not agree? Somebody said, is there any advantage to objectifying? None. I mean, we feel lousy about the other person, and we feel lousy about ourselves, and nothing gets done. So it's, human beings do not abuse human beings abuse objects. Objectification allows us to harm people, emotionally and physically. That's the danger. So, is our sense different before and after self-betrayal? And remember, self-betrayal is what happens when I know I should do something for another and then don't. Okay? Was the husband's sense about his wife different before and after he betrayed? Yes. Let me move on. When I betray what I feel I should do for another, I feel justified, judgmental, blaming, angry, and remember each example that I used. All right. So what doesn't work when you're in the box? If you're in the box, you're objectifying about another person. What does not work? Trying to change others. By the way, I teach motivational interviewing. This doesn't work out of the box either. Motivational interviewing is not about motivating and changing people. It's about exploring their motivation, finding out what would it take for them to decide to manage their diabetes. Okay? And we also, so changing people doesn't work in or out of the box. I'm amazed at how many people get married and immediately start on the road of trying to change their spouse. Okay. Doing your best to cope doesn't work while you're in the box because you're not coping. You're angry. You feel like a victim. Leaving the situation permanently. Several years ago, I was doing couples work at the church where I went, and I always told them, never divorce while you're in the box about the other person. Why? Why do you think I told them never get a divorce while you're in the box toward the other? Because you're seeing them as an object. Are you seeing a true picture of them? See, when I'm in the box, I am elevating myself and bringing them down, and it's not real. Does everybody follow what I'm saying? So never divorce while you're in the box. And this is one of the things that therapy can do. It can help you see the truth about yourself and your relationship and what role. We are relational. It takes two people to have an argument. My son trusts me enough that when he has an argument with his wife, he calls me because he knows I'm not going to take his side. He knows I'm going to show him his role in the problem, no matter how self-righteous he may be at the time. It does him no good to have me say to him, yeah, you're right, she was completely wrong there, as if he had no role in it. Okay. So, communicating. How many of you ever heard the old buzz, communication is the key to better relationships? How many of you heard that? It's crap. Okay? Communication is only the key to better relationships when? When you're out of the box. If you're in the box, what are you going to be communicating to the other person? Everything that's wrong with them. Everything they've done to you, because you're a victim when you're in the box. How many of you are following me? Any of you having some aha moments? One person, that's good, that's, you know. So how do we get out? How do we get out of the box and stay out more often? Because that's what I work on every day. How do I get out and stay out more often? So here is a complex drawing I did about the box and the box is my active resistance to another person. Okay? So here's a question. Notice the box, that's me in the box. Notice something that stands out about the box. What do you see? It's open on one side, right? So here's my question, and I'm going to point to you. What's your name? Sam? And what's your name? Who? Carol. Can I be in the box with Sam while at the same time out of the box with Carol? Yes. And that's one of the keys to getting out. That's one of the keys to getting out. And remember, the box is my active resistance to seeing the other as a person. And I want you to, those words are important. It is my active resistance, not what they're doing. Because we love to blame. So, how to get out and stay out, notice, more often. Not always. I'd love to. Okay. All right, try to see the world of the other, but how? Before I went out into traffic that day, remember, I said to myself, I had to think about the fact that these people were just trying to get somewhere just like me. As soon as I saw that they were people who were every bit as important with me as me, I'm out. I'm already out. Okay? Think of ways, even small, you may have mistreated someone. This is the reason my son calls me. Your best friends are not the people who agree with you. Your best friends are the ones that help you see your role in the problem. And that's what I try to do with my friends, and that's what I want my friends to do with me, and what I try to do with my son. You know, okay, so his wife did this. Does that mean your only choice was to point a finger at her and say you shouldn't have done that? Well, what else could I have done? That's where I come in. And I help him to see her as a person, so she can see him as a person. Okay? And I really want you to pay attention to what I said. Your best friends are not the ones when you come to them and say, my husband was being a jerk. Your best friends are not the ones who say, yeah, he was a jerk. Your best friends are the ones that walk you through what you contributed to the problem. I know some of you are thinking, but what if I'm perfect? Okay. Then we have to identify something we should do for someone. You know, like apologize, ask forgiveness, recognize our own self-victimization, ask, might I be wrong? All right, and here's another thing that I try to live by. Criticism of self and others serves no useful purpose. What do you want to do instead? How many of you have ever laid in bed at night and played over and over something you did wrong during the day? How many of you found it does not help you sleep? What would help you sleep is, I don't like what I did, here's what I will do instead next time. Now, I want to tell you about this page something very personal. Remember I talked about my mother. My mother was not just emotionally abusive, my mother was physically abusive. I am fused from C3 to C7. When she got angry when I was a kid, she used to hit me in the face. Okay, and I've had 2 surgeries to repair it. I went to a 3-day Arbinger weekend. Remember I told you about Arbinger? Okay, and they created a lot of this material. And the leader of the weekend was Jim Farrell. I really recommend many of you look him up on LinkedIn if you follow people. Jim, F-E-R-R-E-L-L. Brilliant guy. We're on the first day of the 3-day weekend, and he asks, is there anybody in here that would like to talk about somebody you're in the box with? Who did I raise my hand about? My mother. I told Jim my story. Jim asked me, how have I been responding to my mother? And I said, oh, please excuse me on this one. She pisses me off. You hear me being the victim. Now, a lot of you are thinking, well, you were a victim. I was a victim. But I'm no longer a 4-year-old or 5-year-old or 6-year-old. I'm an adult now that has choices. And Jim looked at me and said, you're going to need to figure out a way to ask your mother to forgive you. I about lost it. And then we took a break to go into these other rooms and just sit and meditate. I ruminated. I didn't meditate. By the end of the last day, I understood exactly what Jim was saying. For decades, I felt justified at mistreating my mother because she mistreated me. And even as I told you about what she did to me as a child, how many of you were thinking, how awful? And if I told you there were periods where I just had no desire to talk to her, so many of you might have said, I don't blame you, right? And see, I had all sorts of friends that would support my anger and hatred toward her. At my dad's funeral, I walked up to my mother a month after the Arbinger weekend, and I took her hand, and I said, Mom, life was hard with you when I was a kid, but I have really mistreated you for the last 30 years, and I'm sorry. And we both cried. And my slavery ended. Did everybody understand what I'm telling you? It was my continuing to blame her for who I am now that kept me enslaved. Okay, so what to remember? There are two ways of being: the responsive way, in which I see people as people, and the resistant way, in which we see people as objects. When we betray ourselves, what we should do, we enter the resistant way. In the resistant way, we see others and ourselves in ways that justify our betrayals. In the box, we provoke others to get in the box as well, like my mother provokes my brother. And the mistreatment we get from them gives us justification for staying in the box. That's the sad thing. We get out of the box not by focusing on ourselves, but by responding to others, receiving the humanity of those we have been resisting. Once out of the box, we stay out of the box by doing for others what we know we need to do. This is a key. If others are responsible for my misery and my happiness, I am stuck. If I'm responsible, I'm free. Okay? Without the power to choose misery, I'm powerless to choose happiness. Now, my time is up. Can I have 2 minutes? Okay, thank you. To power to choose is mine every day, every minute. Do I choose responsiveness or resistance? Choose resistance, and I'm blind to the choice. Herein lies my freedom. The world I encounter springs from my own soul. Which world do I choose? Terry Warner, who created all this learning, said at one time, when you learn to stay out of the box more often, shall we call this progress? And he said, I think not. We have made no progress. There's no progress to be made. Being fully human, fully who you are, is not an achievement. It's more like a homecoming. Kids get this. Little kids get this. We teach them by all of our judgments to go in the box. It's sad, really. So, here's a final thought. We are all connected and in relationship to each other. I give birth to my thoughts through my interaction with you. I learn to love through you. I have empathy because you have extended it to me. I have courage because you have encouraged me. When I objectify you and you me, none of this is possible. When I see you and you me, our worlds open up. Here are some references for this talk. Every one of them, if you read, if you're really interested, you want to read something relatively short and powerful, Leadership and Self-Deception is one of the most powerful books ever written. Now, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to end with this. By the way, one of those among you is the Messiah. Thank you.
Dr. Berger just let me know that he is going to be in the exhibit hall and for us to go ahead and ask him any questions. Cool. So that exhibit hall is actually opening up at 11 o'clock sharp. Lunch will be served there. I hope to see you all there. Jenny and Sam, we need you up here for photos. And we will see you later. Have a great day.